Throughout my career in tech, both as an engineer and in tech sales, I've led tons of interviews for entry and mid-level positions, and I want to make a video today about 5 major things that you're doing that are costing you an opportunity to land at your target company. And I just want to reiterate, I've done tons of interviews both for college grads, for people breaking into tech sales, and I also coach a bootcamp, Tech Sales Ascension, where I'm coaching tons of students regularly on how to break in. And there's so many obvious things, some of which I'll talk about today, but I also want to get to more advanced topics. So we're going to go beyond just the low-hanging fruit today, but there's so many things that you do in the first round. There's so many small things as you get later and later in the process that maybe, again, it could be that you're a good candidate, but people are doing small things that ultimately make the company more comfortable moving forward with a different candidate as opposed to yourself. And so having seen it from both sides of the coin, not only coaching individuals, not only leading interviews, but also breaking in myself from an engineering career as well, I think the most obvious one that people really, for whatever reason, don't seem to get is I get that you're willing and able to do a lot. I get that you want to work hard. I get that you want to run through a wall. But just saying that doesn't differentiate you from anyone else. And it doesn't mean that you've actually taken that energy and channeled it and studied about the industry. And I get so frustrated when people come into interviews. And again, we're talking about the first round here. This is kind of a lower hanging fruit one. But if you're coming into the first round and you think your people person and your extroversion and your past sales experience in retail or logistics means that I get what it's like, I don't care. That is a baseline expectation that you're willing to work hard, especially at that entry level, before you get more and more strategic as you go up higher and higher. So just reiterating, look, it's great that you have energy. It's great that you have enthusiasm, but you need to channel that. And before you even get to that first round interview, it's not that you're excited about the opportunity. It's that you're so excited about the opportunity that you've done a ton of research over the last couple of months about tech sales. And you're very clear, not only on why you want to break into tech sales, but why you want to work at that company specifically. If you show up and you just think you're going to wow someone and schmooze your way to the next round, you maybe at a maximum get to the next round, but that's where it very quickly falls apart. And again, as we look towards maybe that second round interview or the first one where you're going past a recruiter, this is a mistake that I've made myself, and I think it's worth really calling out, is a lot of times, maybe at the SDR level, certainly at the account executive level, a second or third interview would be actually meeting an account executive on the team. So if you get the recruiter approval, if you get the manager approval, before any type of exercise or final rounds, you may meet another coworker that really is just kind of a vibe check, for lack of a better word. And the mistake that I've made, and I see too many people taking as well, is taking that way too serious. And again, there's a time and a place. You absolutely have to take the recruiter interview, the sales manager interview, etc. But if they have an interview where they're like, hey, I want you to meet a rep on the team to get a better idea of what this culture is like, I mean, yeah, don't let your guard down. Don't come in all lackadaisical. But if you're hitting them with tons of deep questions, if you're hitting them with like very buttoned up and formal questions like, what is a day in the life like? And all these boring things, right? Like, keep in mind, from the insider perspective, having been on those types of interviews before, it's usually a disruption to my day. And it doesn't mean I don't want to do it, but oftentimes I'm like, oh man, I have this interview, like I almost forgot, right? And then 10 minutes before, I'm like looking at their LinkedIn, I'm making sure that I have enough time to actually talk to them and get an idea of what they're about. And so again, when you come in hot and heavy, when you come in and you're treating it like a super hardcore formal interview, it's like, hey, like I'm just here to like see if you're a cool person and probably more of a culture fit than like saying and going back to the manager and saying, hey, I don't think they can do sales and this is why. It's more, if anything, red flags around, hey, this person's like kind of intense and weird, not actually a good fit for what we do. And again, this is a big one I see. This would be the third major point here as we're kind of going deeper in that mid to later stage interview round. And while this maybe applies to salespeople, I think it also applies to other people with maybe tech experience or customer facing experience that is not directly tech sales. Like, don't get me wrong, that is absolutely a benefit to have that. But if you come into the interview and you're telling me that your retail, your car sales experience, your help desk experience where you talk to engineers makes you game ready to just break into tech sales, you're absolutely wrong. Now, don't get me wrong. Again, that experience is valuable, but it has to be packaged in the right way. And the common mistake that I see is people that have any type of sales experience or any type of relevant, maybe customer facing, customer support types of experience, is they just grab onto that so tight and they just feel like they have to tell you about that experience. And that sales experience is why I'm a great fit for this job. And it's just one component. Again, it's great to know that you're comfortable making cold calls. And it's great to know that you're comfortable in front of other people, trying to sell them, trying to talk to them, carry a conversation. But again, if you're sitting there and saying, no, it's just like car sales, or it's just like I've gotten a ton of customer support experience, so I'm not scared at all of the phones. It's like, hey, no one's even asking, right? Like, it's great. It's great that you have that experience. But again, if you channel that and make that a relevant point as to why you're interested in tech sales, and you also can then use that to have curiosity around the differences, now I'm getting more intrigued. Because again, at the entry level, I want someone who's willing to work hard, who's not gonna shy away from the phones and do all these different things, but I also want them to be coachable, and I'm not expecting them to be an expert. So when you come in here and tell me that your past experience that has very little or nothing to do with a B2B tech sales motion, don't get carried away and think that that's just gonna take you to the promised land and make you stand out. I would rather have, as a pure hypothetical, like an athlete who accomplished something very impressive, doesn't have sales experience, but I know for a fact they've trained under high-level coaches. They've continually improved their craft for a significant period of time. That is more intriguing to me than someone with a year of sales experience, 2 years of customer-facing experience. Again, if it is not packaged in the right way. The fourth point here being that a lot of times I see candidates focusing on little details. Again, maybe in the example of that sales experience. They want to keep talking about that sales experience because look at me, I've done sales and I can do tech sales, right? As opposed to creating a very cohesive story and creating a strong narrative as to why you want to break into tech sales. And again, this kind of encompasses also my last point that we'll get to here momentarily. But again, I think a lot of people want to say everything. They want to make sure that the interviewer understands all these little details. And at the end of the day, there's only so much an interviewer is going to remember. And I would much rather have a candidate that's coming to me with one or two really strong points, one or two really interesting things, or something that's maybe complex about the product that they really understood that most candidates in those final rounds did not. That's the thing I'm gonna remember, as opposed to the fact that you lived overseas for 3 years and then you started a small e-commerce business and then you flipped real estate for a while and then you did retail sales and now you're here. I don't care about all those details, but if you create a nice story, if you touch on those things, again, it's totally fair game to bring those up in a small and relevant way. But if any of that catches my interest as a manager, I can now ask you about that and get more details, which this again ties into my last and strongest point, especially at these final rounds, whether it's a demonstration or whether it's that conversation with the VP of sales. People put so much pressure on themselves to accomplish everything all in that moment that you forget that in a natural B2B sales process, it's not something that's done on one call. And if you're sitting there and trying to get every piece of information from the prospect, if you're sitting there and you're talking about, in again, the example of a demonstration final round interview where you have to pitch the product, right? If you're talking about every little detail and you're not asking questions from the fictional prospect of what they care about, what challenges they're facing, right? These are the things I see so often because people not only want to get the meeting, they want to get everyone tied in. They want to know budget. They want to do all these different things. And again, it's great if you can do that. And don't get me wrong, a skilled salesperson can get those things if done properly. But if it's really mechanical, if I can tell you're like checking your brain and thinking, okay, I have to ask about budget. I've got to ask about who should be involved in the next call. I've got to make sure I mention these 10 different things about the product. And again, it's a combo of that last point as well. You can't create that cohesive story and you're trying to do everything. You're trying to ask every question. You're trying to make sure you have all the information before you go for that close and ask for a next meeting. Ask if they have any hesitations about them hiring you. These are the things where I see people trip up so much. And again, it means you're good. But when you do that and the other candidate that I'm talking to has a very cohesive story, when maybe they missed a few major points, but I felt really comfortable with the way that they led a demonstration or the way that they pitched a product, I am much more compelled to take that person than the person I can tell I'm gonna have to unteach all these habits and make them relax and make them not feel so anxious all the time, versus someone who's coming in as a blank slate, shows equal ability, but kind of on the other end of the spectrum where they're not providing too much details, they're providing just enough, and I see that they're coachable and hungry. I'm gonna go with that candidate versus the person that's like, what do I say? How do I say it? And then you're even asking the interviewer, like, did I get that right? Did I get that right? Did I do that wrong, right? As opposed to a simple reframe, which is like, hey, I thought I did pretty well overall. There's a few key things that I think I missed, and I'm curious what your feedback is. You know, if I'm a rep 6 months from now, how would this look different? How would I improve, right? It's these small reframes. And again, I know it sounds trivial and I might be getting too hypothetical here, but if you're the person that keeps your composure, can admit that you did things wrong, that's fine. I don't want you to be an expert. I don't need you to be an expert at that entry level. But if on the flip side, you're coming in and you're overthinking everything, you're so worried about making a mistake, that is going to be a more problematic and harder to train employee than someone who's coming in focused on the right things, obviously has areas to improve, but has clearly put enough effort in to have a strong foundation and is eager and willing to build from there. So if you have questions, I know this got a little hypothetical, definitely ask me below in the comments. And again, I call out too, for many of you looking at tech sales ascension, we did recently launch a free lesson that has numerous different lessons about tech sales. So it'll give you a good idea, not only of the industry, there's a lot of free value there, but also what our platform is. Feel free to check it out in the description. But if you have any questions, again, let me know. I would love to hear maybe some of the stories that you've gone through or things that you've done that have and have not worked. But appreciate your time as always, and we'll see you in our next video.